Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive with us. Today we're going to be looking at some of the tactics that corporations are using to, well, encourage us to spend more money. And we're basing this on an article that we found called "The Systematic Exploitation of Consumers by Corporations." And it's really pretty fascinating. I mean, one of the things that they talk about is that the price of onions can actually fluctuate depending on whether you be browsing on an iPhone or an Android.
Wow,
I know, right?
that's crazy.
It sounds crazy,
Yeah,
but it's really just the tip of the iceberg.
it is. And it really does go beyond just what you might consider clever marketing. It's about how companies are using data and algorithms to tailor our experiences of prices in ways that will obviously benefit them a lot more than they benefit us.
So, okay, algorithms, that's a word we hear all the time. But what does that actually mean in this context?
Well, you can think of an algorithm kind of like a recipe. It takes a bunch of different ingredients. In this case, the ingredients are information about you, like your location, your browsing history, the type of device that you're using, even crazy stuff like how much battery life you have left on your phone. And it mixes all of those ingredients together to produce a specific outcome, like the price that you see for a product or the ads that are shown to you.
So they're gathering all this data about us and then using it to manipulate prices. I mean, that's kind of unsettling.
It can be, especially when you start to think about, the potential for some unfair practices. This article talks about digital price discrimination, and that's where companies charge different prices to different people based on how much they think that person is willing to pay for something. There was even a study done in Belgium that found that ride-hailing apps were charging higher fares when the user's phone battery was low.
Really, just because their battery was low. I mean, that seems predatory.
Yeah, it does raise some ethical questions for sure, because it's really preying on people's urgency, and their desire to just get where they need to go, even if it means paying more. And it's all thanks to these algorithms, that are analyzing our behavior and someone's predicting our decisions.
So it's not just about the price of onions, and it's about how all of these algorithms are shaping our entire online experience. But, let's shift gears a little bit here and talk about another tactic. And I have to admit, I kind of love this word. It's shrinkflation. It
Yeah.
sounds like something out of a comic book.
It does have a certain ring to it, but it is unfortunately a very real phenomenon, and it's hitting all of our wallets. Shrinkflation is the practice of making products smaller. Reducing the size of a cereal box or the number of sheets on a toilet paper roll, while keeping the price the same.
So it's like a sneaky price hike in disguise. You're getting less, but it's not as obvious as just raising the price.
Exactly. It's a way for companies to increase their profits without making it look like they're raising prices. And the article mentions several examples of this, like Maggie packets have shrunk from 80 grams to 55 grams. Coca-Cola bottle, they've gone from 250 milliliters down to 200. It's happening all over, and honestly, a lot of people probably don't even notice it.
Yeah, I think it's easy to miss those subtle changes, especially when you're buying, familiar products that you buy all the time. It's almost like a magic trick. Now you see it, now you don't.
That's a great analogy. It really speaks to the power of these tactics that corporations are using. They're subtle, they operate below our level of awareness.
So we've got these algorithms that are manipulating prices online and shrinkflation, shrinking products in the real world. What other tricks do these corporations have up their sleeves?
Oh, there are so many more, and they're very interesting. So let's talk about planned obsolescence. Have you ever noticed how your phone just seems to slow down right when a new model comes out?
Oh my gosh, yes. I always thought it was just me. Is that like a real thing?
Well, it's definitely a topic of a lot of debate. This article focuses on how a lot of products, and especially electronics, seem to be designed to last only a certain amount of time before they need to be replaced.
So they're actually building products that are meant to break down.
Well, it's not always about things like physically breaking down. Sometimes it's more about making the product obsolete in other ways. For example, smartphones. So a lot of smartphones these days, you can't really replace the battery yourself. I mean, they're glued in and really difficult to replace. And then those batteries are designed to degrade over time. So after a couple of years, your phone might still work fine, but the battery life is just terrible.
It's so frustrating. It seems like they could easily design phones with replaceable batteries, like they used to.
Yeah, you're right. The technology definitely exists. The article actually mentions that in Europe, there's been this big push for regulations that would require companies like Apple to make their products more repairable and use universal charging ports.
That's great. It sounds like the right to repair movement is gaining some traction.
It is, people are really starting to realize that they should have the right to fix their own stuff or take it to an independent repair shop instead of being forced to go back to the manufacturer.
Yeah, it just makes sense. It's better for our wallets and it's definitely better for the environment. Speaking of feeling locked in, this article also talks about something called drip pricing, which I think we've all experienced at one point or another.
Oh, drip pricing is the worst. It's that thing where you see a price for something online and you think, wow, what a great deal. And then as you go through the checkout process, they just keep adding on all these extra fees like service charges, processing fees, convenience fees. And by the time you get to the final price, it's way higher than what you originally saw.
It happens to me all the time with travel websites and food delivery apps. It's so annoying. It's like they're intentionally trying to make it difficult to compare prices.
Yeah, you're exactly right. It takes advantage of, our desire for a good deal. And I think a lot of us have this tendency to focus on that initial price. And by the time we realize how much extra we're paying, well, we've already kind of invested in that purchase and we're less likely to back out.
Like they're playing these psychological games with us. But there's another tactic that this article mentions that I think is even more insidious, the razor blade model. Can you explain that one for our listeners?
Sure, so the razor blade model, it's all about selling a base product at a low price like a razor, and then making your real profit on the consumables that go with it, like the razor blades. A classic example of this is printers.
Oh yeah, printers are practically given away these days, but the ink cartridges cost a fortune.
Exactly, and what's even crazier is that this article talks about how some printer companies are actually using firmware updates. Those are basically like software updates for your printer to block people from using third-party ink cartridges. So they're trying to force you to buy their extensive brand name cartridges.
Wait, they can actually do that? I mean, that seems so unfair.
It is, but it turns out that it's kind of a legal gray area, according to this article. One report found that 9 major printer manufacturers had released almost 900 firmware updates, specifically designed to block third-party ink. It's all about maintaining their profit margin.
So it's like a trap you're lured in by the cheap printer, but then you're stuck buying their overpriced ink forever. I feel like we need to play a round of buzzword bingo here just to lighten the mood. What do you think?
Let's do it. I love buzzword bingo.
Okay, first up, AI-powered. We see that everywhere these days. But what does it actually mean?
Yeah, that one gets thrown around a lot. But in reality, a lot of products that claim to use AI are simply using some pretty basic algorithms or pre-programmed functions. It's really important to be critical of that term and not just assume that something is more innovative or intelligent just because it has the AI label slapped on it.
Okay, how about this one recommended by dentists? I see that on everything from toothpaste to chewing gum.
That's a tricky one. Medically speaking, a lot of times there are ethical guidelines that prevent healthcare professionals from directly endorsing specific products. So when you see a claim like recommended by dentists, it's worth digging a little deeper. Like, who are these dentists? Is there actually any real evidence to back up their recommendation? Or is it just clever marketing?
Good point. It's easy to fall for those claims. Okay, last one, clinically proven. I feel like I see that on every skincare product and supplement bottle.
That's another one to be cautious about. Clinically proven can sound really scientific and convincing, but it's important to ask yourself, what does that actually mean? What was the clinical trial who conducted it? Was it published in a reputable journal? Or is it just a marketing ploy?
So basically, we need to be skeptical consumers and not just take these marketing claims at face value.
Absolutely. Being an informed consumer means, doing your research, reading reviews, and really questioning anything that sounds too good to be true.
Well said, but it's not all doom and gloom, right? I mean, despite all of these sneaky tactics, there are things that we can do to kind of fight back and reclaim our power as consumers. And this article highlights the right to repair movement that we talked about earlier as kind of a beacon of hope.
The right to repair is all about giving consumers the right to fix their own products or take them to independent repair shops instead of being forced to go back to the manufacturer.
It just seems like common sense. Why shouldn't we be able to fix our own stuff?
Exactly. And it's not just about saving money. It's also about reducing waste and being more sustainable. When we can repair things instead of throwing them away, well, it's a lot better for the planet. And you mentioned that big win for the movement in the EU with the universal charging ports.
Yeah.
That was a huge victory. It shows that legislative action can actually work to curb those corporate excesses and give consumers more choices. We definitely need more initiatives like this globally. Like, imagine if every company was required to make their products more durable, repairable, and sustainable.
That would be amazing. It feels like we're at a tipping point. More and more people are becoming aware of these issues and demanding change. But there's one more important aspect that we need to discuss, the environmental cost of all of this consumerism.
Absolutely. This article makes a really strong connection between our constant need to buy new things and the increasing strain that it's putting on our planet's resources, all this manufacturing and shipping, and eventually just the disposal of all of these products. It's definitely contributing to climate change and the growing problem of e-waste.
It's just a vicious cycle. We're being exploited, and in the process, the planet is being exploited too.
It is a sobering thought. This article points out that the smartphone industry alone was responsible for around 580 million tons of CO2 emissions in 2020, and e-waste from just discarded electronics now makes up about 10% of global waste production.
Wow, those are some staggering numbers. It really puts things into perspective.
It does. I think we really need to start thinking more critically about our consumption habits. It's not just about our wallets anymore. It's about the future of our planet.
Well said. So what can we do? I mean, it can all feel so overwhelming.
Yeah, it can feel like we're just swimming upstream sometimes, right?
Right, totally. It feels like a lot to digest.
Yeah, but even small changes can make a difference. The first step, as we talked about, is just awareness. You're already ahead of the game by knowing about these tactics. Digital price discrimination, shrinkflation, planned obsolescence strip pricing, the razor blade model.
Yeah, forewarned is forearmed. But what are some practical steps we can take? It's easy to feel kind of paralyzed by it all.
You're right, it can be daunting, but just remember that every purchase is a vote. We have the power to choose where we spend our money and which companies we support.
So vote with our wallets.
Exactly. Do your research before you buy. Compare prices from different sellers. Look for companies that are transparent about their pricing and that are really committed to those ethical and sustainable practices.
So being an informed consumer takes a little more effort these days.
It does, but it's worth it. Think of it as an investment in your financial well-being and the health of the planet.
Okay, so research, compare, choose wisely. What else?
And don't underestimate the power of collective action. Support organizations like the Right to Repair movement that are fighting for consumer rights and pushing for those more sustainable practices.
Yeah, we talked about the EU's win with the universal charging ports. That's a great example of how policy changes can make a real difference.
Absolutely, we need more of that. Contact your elected officials, sign petitions, spread the word. The more people that demand change, the more pressure it puts on companies and policymakers to listen.
We're all in this together. It's like a collective consumer consciousness.
Oh, I love that consumer consciousness. It's about being mindful, intentional, and informed. It's about shifting our mindset from, I need to have this, to do I really need this?
That's a really good question. What would happen if we all just paused to ask ourselves that question before we made a purchase?
I mean, imagine a world where we prioritized quality over quantity, experiences over possessions, and where we were all just more aware of the impact that our choices are having on the planet.
That sounds pretty amazing. More sustainable, more equitable, more fulfilling.
It does, doesn't it? And it really does start with each of us making those small changes in our own lives.
So to our listeners, as we wrap up this deep dive, we'll leave you with this thought. What's one small change that you can make today to become a more conscious consumer? It could be as simple as repairing something instead of replacing it, or researching a company before you buy from them, or maybe even supporting an organization that's fighting for consumer rights. Every little bit counts. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay empowered.